Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here with you and to open this webinar that closes the week of events began on Monday, 8 March, and dedicated to the celebration of women and I&D more in general. My name is Paola Barazzetta. I am I&D leader for PwC Italy, and I took the role in 2018 before Lia Turi was in charge for this role. Lia now is EMEA I&D leader, as you may know. As a professional, I am also part of TLS line of services. As a legal partner, I am a lawyer. During the past event of this week, we had the chance to get some important inputs and to discuss how PwC people can really make the difference regarding gender equality. Also, due to the current context and pandemic situation, the leadership model of the future maybe must be redefined for the benefit of all of us and maybe for the benefit of the future generation and for our young colleagues. And so it is important to reflect what has changed and is still changing in the way we live and we work. This is the right time, according to my opinion, to talk and discuss together about these new models, mostly based on trust, on caring, on listening to our people. Also in light of changes brought by technology, digital transformation, and smart working, which were really and are really, really important, particularly also in this pandemic moment. We have all seen how the pandemic has negatively impacted women who have managed and still manage heavy work and family burdens. So it is time not only to support women for the effort they are making in light of a pandemic, but also to create space for the effective contribution to the leadership of the future. They can really play an important role even if the context is extremely challenging. As you may know, several studies show that the full socio-economic context and the profit of the companies can really benefit from a greater presence of women in the workforce, but not only in the workforce, also from a gender balanced leadership. Having said that, we all, men and women, should give up the delay and abandon cultural resistance, often due to the strong impact of unconscious bias that, as you may know, are always present and must be identified and possibly avoided. Today's panel is very rich and I'm sure will allow us to discuss about the theme of leadership in general, but also in relationship to the gender. Today we have with us three female CEOs who have been recognized as role models by our PwC colleague. These three women are coming from different companies, different countries, and different fields of activity. They will bring their experience and tell us how they have achieved important professional and personal goals, and which winning characteristic will define the leader of the future. Let me please welcome Barbara Cominelli from GIL Italy, Claudia Azevedo from Sonae, Portugal, and Magdalena Zierkwu, Jegvuk, sorry, I hope not to be wrong with the pronunciation, country manager of Google Cloud Poland. This important guest will be moderated by Blair Shepard, our PwC Global Strategy and Leadership Leader, which I thank in advance for his kind availability. But before starting with the panel, I give the floor to Andrea Bocelli, our Italian TSP, for a welcome message and also for a point of view of the Italian firm. Andrea, thank you, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Paola. Well, a point of view of the Italian firm, it's a lot of responsibility. You know, I can only try to share my point of view and what I'm trying to achieve with your great help and Leah's great help during my time as CEO here at PwC Italy. Well, I think that these very days that we are living are probably the most important period that I personally will face in my life, considering the context and considering the need for social and cultural revolutions and changes that we need to put in place, that we need at least to seed for the future to be better than what we would have left behind our generation in, as we looked at it only 24 months ago. And we talk about social changes and cultural changes, and of course, the idea, the concept, and the principle of gender equality are a great and I would say necessary pillar to any changes that we will try to, and we will hopefully will accomplish in this next few months and years. Just to give an idea, a couple of facts. Our new prime minister here in Italy, Mr. Draghi, during his speech, his first speech to the Italian Parliament, mentioned how gender parity cannot and should not be limited to compliance with rules and regulations. It's a cultural issue. It's something that requires an evolution of the system, an evolution of the environment. And we are business people, and we have to think about the contribution that we can give as business people. And this contribution is even more important if you look at, as an example, what comes out of our CEO survey that we just published in the last few days, where it's really interesting to see how the reliability and the trustworthiness of enterprises in these few days, in these few months, has been identified as the most important thing for many people. So businesses and enterprises are now looked at institutions that are possibly taking the responsibility, that have to take the responsibility of guide social evolution in the future. So I think that if we think about what we can do as business people, as the leading class in these days, we have to take this responsibility, and we have to bring it forward for the future. So this is just my view. So Paola is probably, I don't know, it's possibly not the view of everybody here at PwC Italy. I'm not sure it's the same view you have, because we talked about these things. But probably it's better if I cut it short. And I turn the microphone to Blair. Blair is, I met Blair almost 3 years ago when I became CEO here in Italy, and we had this meeting, and we started talking with the other newcomers of the CEO community at PwC Global. We started talking about what the future could be and what we could do. And I found that the way Blair is able to facilitate certain conversation and pull things out of people and thoughts out of minds is remarkable. And that, of course, if you think about it, Blair is our global strategy and leadership partner responsible for helping us designing what will be this huge organization in the future. I think that is the best that we could have thought. But just quickly, you know, some other achievements that Blair has in his life. He has been a professor at Duke, one of the great universities in America. He has been advisor of many companies and governments. He has written a load of books. And of course, when he speaks, it's always a pleasure to listen, conferences and so on. I think that, you know, the vision that of the future that Blair and the capacity of analyzing factors that might influence the future out of Blair's thought process is always amazing. So I will leave it to you, Blair, and I'm sure that you will do a great job. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, Andrea. Actually, the introductions we should be doing, I think, are for the amazing women on this panel. So there's a thing we teach in doing this kind of video mechanism, which is be careful about what's in your background. I was thinking about changing the picture in the background because it's a picture of my father, the patriarch of the family. But it seems to me kind of appropriate. We have a two-dimensional static man on the wall and three incredibly dynamic women on the screen for the purposes of this conversation. So I decided to keep it there because it suggests the progress we're making. And so I wanted to use it. So, and thank you, by the way, the three of you for coming. One of the things I decided to do in advance of this was spend a bit of time trying to understand your backgrounds and how you got to where you are and what you seem to care about. I just have to tell you, I'm unbelievably delighted that the three of you have joined us because it's you're remarkable human beings. And so thank you for the time you've given us. And hopefully we get Barbara back. So let's begin. There's going to be two of you have to hold the floor for a minute, and then we'll try to get Barbara back. I do think if I could start there, I actually shared what your resumes and some of the things you've said and thought about with my wife last night. It was a treat to sort of see three such incredibly interesting people. So do you mind if you would just sort of describe what in your experience prepared you for the role you have today, and why you think it was especially helpful? So let's, I guess, begin, Claudia, with you.
Right. Thank you very much, Blair, for the very kind words. Very exaggerated, but thank you. I've been working at Sanai for 26 years. I started off in a very implementation role, very operational role, first in a credit card and then in telecom, and sort of did a very residential marketing, a typical career, and then started to work in the part of more investment management, corporate venture capital in the last years, and also a CEO of Solar Capital. It's more like a private equity company. So I think that both worlds, being very operational and at the same time investing in companies that are now unicorns, gave me sort of a good sense of both worlds, a more traditional operational company and a high growth company. And sort of, I think that what was interesting for this COVID year was that we made possible things that we thought were impossible. You know, if you told me we're going to send 6,000 people home and it's going to work the next day, I'd have said no. But at the same time, having managed these very growth companies, technology company unicorns, you said, no, it's possible. You know, they dream very big. And so I think that the mixture of both worlds, the more traditional corporate world with this new world, I think gave me some instruments to deal with the very tough year we had.
Yeah, let's get to that question in a minute, because I think this is actually the central question of the conversation today, really. But Magna, let's start with you. What is it in your experience prepared you for what you're being asked to do now?
Hello, everyone. So I'm dialing in from Warsaw. When we were preparing for the call, we had a snowstorm, and now it's a beautiful spring sunshine. And that's pretty much the good metaphor of my entire life. So I was a teenager when the communism actually finished in Poland, and I could see powerful people becoming poor and actually looking for any way to earn money for life. I could see poor people suddenly becoming powerful. We could see people like Lech Wałęsa suddenly become president of Poland, former employee of a shipyard. So, that was a very important experience that showed me that nothing is for granted. And there's only a limited amount of things that we can influence. We have to stay open, and we have to prepare for dramatic change, like total turnaround. And I think later in my career, I spent more than 20 years now in the technology. I could see exactly the same. I started with ERP, where actually in the core of the PwC specialization, accountants who didn't know technology suddenly became, unemployed. I could see the revolution of telco, where I spent more than 10 years, where actually traditional telcos lost everything to the mobile telcos. And for the last period of my career, I am with Google, where actually the digital transformation is redefining every single industry. So this is what's my key belief. There's nothing predictable. Only what you can collect is your experience, your values, and you have to stay open for a total turnaround.
So both of you, it's really interesting, and let's pick it up, Barbara, with what in your background prepared you for today. But two really interesting things you just said, both of you, right? Is actually you have to imagine anything is possible, right? In today's world, and you have to be able to turn pretty quickly on a dime, right? And in some ways, your experiences were both prepared you for that. So Barbara, to you, what in your experience prepared you for the role you have today?
I'm sharing very much the thoughts of the two other colleagues, because really for me it was learning through experiences and challenges, failures and successes. I'm also a believer in growth mindset, that we can learn and improve. You probably know Carol Dweck and her philosophy, but for me it was consulting was the imprinting of my way of working, then international experience and different industries, then very important, managing different type of people. So I went from managing brilliant, I'm flying, self-motivated people like you to having 3,000 people in operation in a call center, which you require a very different leadership style. But in general, I think that really leadership is something that you can learn. You try new behavior, you get out of your comfort zone, and you try, you fail, you adjust, and then you learn. And Jack Welch once said that before you are a leader, success is about growing yourself, and when you become a leader, success is about growing others. And I think that that's it. So when you learn it by mistakes and small improvement of your comfort zone, then you're ready to be a coach for others. And they should very much be a coach.
So in some ways, all of you suggested the next question in your answer. And so let's go to it, because it could be kind of central to the whole issue we're grappling with today. So we've been through what may be the most interesting time any one of us has lived through in our own lives. And it put massive challenge on all of you as leaders. There's this interesting statistic that we've been looking at, which is that the number of CEOs who have stepped down in the last few months is really high. And the answer most of them give is, I've lived 10 years in 1 year. I've enough of experience, right? And so you're still here. Thank you for saying, by the way. But what was essential for you to be successful in the last year as leaders? And could you think about a person you admire through this process and why you admire them? Just if you could have those two thoughts roll over in your answer, if we would, please. And so, Magda, let's start with you. Can you react to those two questions? You're on mute.
Thank you. I thought for a while about this recent time, about everything that happened over the pandemic. And, you know, it was also very interesting to see how suddenly the traditional leaders or celebrities were losing their position, how quickly actually the pandemic took away filters. And we could see who is a real leader and who was just looking like a leader. I mean, crisis is working like removal of the filters. Suddenly you are facing the truth, and it is what it is, and it can be PR improved. So I want to bring two people that really will stay with me probably among my life, that impressed me a lot in this pandemic. First was the doctor from China who actually revealed the information about the coronavirus despite huge risk which he has taken, and unfortunately a huge price he has paid for it. So the second person is Andrea Bocelli. It's exactly a year ago when he gave this amazing concert in front of the Milano Cathedral. In both these cases, we could see an individual can have immediate impact on the whole world. That was not possible ever before. And the time in which it happened was just instant. The moment, you know, they performed, the moment the impact was actually something we could feel. And that was possible because even though we're closed at home, the technology connected us like never before. So I really believe that we're now living in new digital global planets where actually every individual's actions may impact the whole world. And that's something that will stay with me in the next years for sure.
So what's fascinating in your answer is the historical notion of a leader as a person in a position of authority is not the way we should be thinking about it in the future, right? Because anyone can have impact. The second thing I think is really important in what you said is that actually there's moments that matter, and if you don't grab that moment, you've lost the opportunity, right? Wonderful reflections. Claudia, let's go to you. Sort of your thoughts about what helped you through this process and who did you particularly admire?
Thank you. The other day I had a sentence, it's not mine, but it was that during this pandemic, leaders had to care and dare. And I really liked the sentence because I thought that's exactly what I've done in the last year. And so we have to care. You know, this is a health crisis, social crisis, and so now it's dedicated a lot of its energy to its people. And so there was a sort of reward because when everybody was needed, they were there, and we had businesses that were overperforming because we're like food retailing, electronic retail, and businesses that were closed, and we managed together to become very strong. And it was an incredible energy that came, and I think that the care part that we've taken, that, you know, it wasn't new, but it's been many years, I think it really, really made a difference. And that there is the, you know, the things you've talked about, the things that we thought were impossible are possible. The fact that companies with many years suddenly became very flat, and there was a executive committee every single day that took a lot of decisions, very quick decisions, and very good. I don't remember a very bad decision. And I look at people that probably don't want to go back to the time where they had, you know, to subject a project in 3 weeks, go to the XCOMs, spend there a day, and everybody would have an opinion. Suddenly, you know, we can take decisions very, very quickly, and they work. And so I think that those are things that will come for the future. So care and dare, I think, is brilliant. As I said, it's not mine, but I really looked at it and said that's exactly what's happening. In terms of people, I have to choose women because of the Women Week, but I'll choose one man, a very special man. But I think, you know, the women leaders, both Ursula von der Leyen, Christine Lagarde, the European Prime Minister of New Zealand, I think they showed a good leadership with this care and dare. and from really very recently, and the man I would choose is the Pope, for giving us hope in the sense of when we saw him in Iraq, doing mass and this distracted by men, and it just suddenly gave us so much hope. How people that hate each other for so many years could come together and sort of have hope for the future.
I think this issue of care and bear is a wonderful phrase, because the two are actually essential to support each other, right? Actually, it's the empathy that comes from care and kind of the humility implied by that, right? That causes you to actually know when you have to take a risk and when you have to step out and actually try, right? And it allows you to be right, because I think the interesting issue is we had a lot of people who dared but had no idea what they were doing and didn't really care about the consequences. But actually, you're describing the person who should be permitted to dare because they care, right? It's a word that's wonderful to see entering our vocabulary as we talk about leaders. We actually put care as a value into PwC that we expressly wanted to focus on about 4 years ago. And we've really been grappling with what does it mean to make that come to life. I think what's wonderful about your answer is you illustrated why it's central and how it comes to life. So thank you for that, by the way.
You did.
Yeah. So Barbara, let's turn to you, your reflections, and you can build on what the others said if you want, but your thoughts about what was special about leading in these times.
Yes, let me first start to share. I mean, I agree with what has been said before, especially on the caring part and the courage that was needed in this period. If you want, this is also another way to see the leader as the person not only in charge, but responsible for the other. I think that in this period, we all realize now that success, the leader that didn't work were the leaders that were looking at, that were maybe looking at success from a monodimensional dimension, while pride were success through others and for others. So including everybody in the definition of success, whatever it could be during a pandemic. But for sure, yes, this capability to take responsibility. The second is, you already mentioned it, humility. In this situation, you realize you don't have all the answers. So you really need to listen, to collaborate, to get all the input you can now to start connecting the dots and beyond the traditional schemes. And this implies that the leader should be able to cut across the organizational silos, the hierarchies, and also the traditional borders of the organization. So talking with stakeholders, your people, your customer, your shareholders, of course, but also the wider society. And this brings also the other point that for all of us, sustainability, ESG, and the purpose of the company, I mean, it was already important before, but now is pivotal in what we do every day. So I think probably those two things, and I agree that also on the fact that there is no possibility to fake it during a crisis. No? So either you care and you are authentic and you walk the talk, or you're out of the game.
Yeah, this is sort of just want to pull three things in what you said that I think are really important to land, right? One of them is the point you raised, which is you have many, many, many people you have to include in your consideration set now, right? And that's a more difficult task. The second one is if you're not genuine, if you don't have integrity, you have no chance of surviving today because it reveals itself so fast. Magda, that's actually where you started, I think, with your answer in a way. You revealed two people who just had exceptional integrity. And I think, Claudia, that was your point about the Pope, which is it was the complete genuineness with which he did what he did that made it successful, right? And then I think this other issue of you somehow have to be able to canvas a lot of people really quickly to get the input, but you got to be willing to take a decision, which is that dare is a critical component of your care and dare piece. So it turns out Barbara went somewhere, so I want to change the order of what I was going to ask and go there. And Claudia, pick it up with you, because it's very clear that Sonai has this as a mission, right? If you think about the crisis we're in the middle of, and hopefully leaving not too far future, there's a whole host of others, right? There is a climate crisis confronting us. There are massive social issues that got worse because of the crisis. You think about all the advances that women have made. Many have been pushed back because of the challenges of trying to hold as many roles as they've had to hold over the last year. And so there's and if you put together with that the kind of the data that Edelman showed most recently in their trust survey, that the one thing in society which is trusted is business, that puts unique pressure on all of you as leaders. So how do you think about your role as leaders in a world that has so many challenges and opportunities, massive opportunities, but challenges confronting it, and the stake that puts on you and what you have to do about it? So Claudia, let's start with you.
Well, I think it's a very positive pressure, and I think it's true. I think people trust companies more than they trust governments, because we're here for the long term, most of us. And as you said, Sonai's mission has been for many, many years to create economic and social value. And sometimes, I've been CEO for 2 years, and people would tease me, say, "Oh, Kirk, how are you going to get over market returns if you have to do both?" But I think this year everybody's got on board of the stakeholder capitalism and the need that we can't have a good business in a bad society. And so I'm very hopeful. We have in Europe the green agenda, and I think companies will do good, and multinationals like yourselves, are present in many countries. I think you'll take the best practice for all over the world, even if it's not the law in those countries. And I think so. I think people are right to trust companies, and I think there's a lot of pressure on companies, and we have to live up to it.
And as a good leader, you created accountability in this conversation already. So PwC, make sure you do your job. I heard you, by the way.
All multinationals.
Really nicely done. So Magda, I do think that Google and the other platforms have a particular responsibility because you are so critical to life going forward. What's the role of a firm like Google in ensuring that life goes in a positive way versus the very dark places it could go? And your role as a leader.
Yeah, it's like, I think, I'll share with you a little bit of the kitchen because I think it's also important to understand, especially for given the audience we have, what happened in the last 16, 18 months is the digital transformation accelerated, and actually it went out of control. Until before pandemic, major senior leaders felt like they are controlling the digital transformation, the pace in which it's coming to the company. There was a huge willingness to define the next steps and control the next steps. What happened is actually it went completely out of control. So in some industries, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's commerce, everything that's happening across e-commerce, it's just out of control, and there will never be going back to normal. The new normal, nobody knows what it is, and it will be different. This is what we know. So what it creates a huge uncertainty and situation where leaders feel afraid. Simply, there's a lot of fear that I don't know what's happening next. I don't control it. So I need to protect myself. I need to stop this situation. And actually, whenever there is a reaction, there is a counter reaction, right? So this is what we see in many industries. Instead of, jumping on the wave, many leaders are saying, no, we can't technology, control what's happening in our industry. Let's try to regulate. Let's try to stop. Let's try to rethink, which is actually creating a lot of harm. So from my own perspective, we see a situation where actually during the pandemic, many Googlers worked, 200% of their time to deliver technology schools, to hospitals, to whoever needed because of the increase of demand. And instead of getting some kind of thank you, great job, we see a wave of hate, like, oh yes, the tech companies are now coming here to have even more influence. So it's very difficult to actually keep people motivated. Like, yes, we need to provide the tools that people need. We're a mission critical company. Because of this lack of right response coming from the market. So it is really a very challenging times also for the digital companies to make sure that we stay to the mission, we protect our values, and we continue to educate and support everyone moving to the digital future.
Yeah, I think you set up a really important piece, and welcome back, Barbara. I think I want to go to you with this question to start with, right? Which is, in some ways, there have been massive winners and massive losers as a result of the pandemic. Actually, it turns out, Claudia, you've had both, right? Within one organization. So we'll get to you second. But in an interesting way, Barbara, you took a pretty courageous act, right? And left a place that was really on a roll and entered a place which is pretty challenging right now, which is real estate, right? And so, first of all, why were you crazy enough to do that, right? But the second one is, how do you think about what it means to manage the circumstances? Because in some ways, Magda described being as successful as firms have been during the pandemic is a really hard leadership problem for largely because people actually don't like that you've been successful. They're unhappy with you, right? And that's a new thing for Google to experience. We hate you is a new thing, right? And so I think it's really, but then the issue of, what do you do with a real estate firm? We all need real estate, but clearly we need a completely different kind of business than we now have. And so can you just talk about the comparison between leading in Microsoft, it's thriving, and leading in JLL that has some really interesting challenges? Do you mind doing that?
Sure, and thank you for the patience with my connections. This is the time where someone in the building starts playing with video games. And
Thanks for persisting, by the way.
Thank you. Right, I would say that, Microsoft, I actually joined the JLL 3 months ago, so I got the wave now of the pandemic with Microsoft and the huge growth now with the digital tools that we all use together with the tools of Google to work and live. And the difficulty there was really to stretch as much as possible to provide support to the customer. So to do as much as we could do. Maybe with Microsoft, it wasn't that much that rebound in terms of hate, because what we've seen is really, we tried to stretch and to support everybody. Of course, it was easier now because you motivate people, because people are happier. People inside are stretched, overwhelmed, but happy because they go and support the schools to set up digital classes, because they go and create an application for telemedicine for the hospitals. That is where you see the sense of purpose now, because if you do it now, if you use your technology to support, to provide the technology for free in many occasions and so on. So that was amazing from a certain viewpoint, because really you understand how technology is important. And I think that this is now what we all understood, that it's not just a tool, but is something that we need to embed in any company. So this is maybe going to the other side of the dark side of the retail, if you want. Now that I'm on this side, this company, I joined JLL because I saw a huge opportunity for transformation here, because our leadership, our CDO is really set up on a strategy to become a tech and green company specialized in real estate. And I see many companies now try to go with this type of vision. Of course, between the vision and the execution, there is a long way to go. But I think that we are really understanding, try to have technology at the center of the strategy. It's not something where we try to combat. It has to be incorporated in the business model. And of course, has been tough. The year has been tough for real estate, but this is also the reason why, for us, this is not just an opportunity to reimagine the industry, but we are obliged to reimagine the industry. We won't go back where we were before because so much has changed. And so we really need to reinvent and reimagine the future of the industry. And this is beautiful, if you want, as a challenge.
This is a fascinating thing. The need to reimagine traditional business at this point in time is a really fascinating thing. And in some ways, Claudia, coming to you, I think Barbara belongs in the Iberian Peninsula because there's a certain element of Don Quixote in it, right? But I think actually the windmills will fall in this case, is my hunch. So can we turn to you, because actually you've had the extremes inside your own business, right? Of those that really did well and those that were being crushed in, and you've navigated it amazingly well. So how do you deal with the tough things where people just aren't going to stores, and the parts where actually the technology elements of your business and the delivery parts of the business that you have are thriving like crazy? So how do you navigate managing you could think of as sort of manic depressive leadership challenges?
I think we were lucky that we had a part of the portfolio that was doing very well, because this virus was blind. You could be the best manager in the world of a hotel or a restaurant chain, and you'd be hit. So I think we looked at it like we were lucky that we have such diverse portfolio, and we took the decision early on that we wouldn't, for example, lay off anybody, because we didn't want, for Portugal and the Portuguese being a heavy tourist industry, we saw a lot of devastation. We said we don't want to burden the government with this extra cost in Portugal, and we are mainly in Portugal. So we had, at the same time as our food and the digital electronics were really, I mean, for example, our food business, the warehouse was 3 weeks in a row above the Christmas traffic, and we know when Christmas is. This we didn't know. Or, for example, electronics business had a 600% growth or something, and digital. And at the same time, we had 1,000 stores closed. So we had everything. And I think the decision was let's rally together, and we did. For example, I started having weekly meetings with all the CEOs together, just for an hour. So everybody, the ones that were on the high and ones that were on the low, could share experiences, and a lot of different laws, and we quickly supported each other through a very tough time.
So let's pick a question that came from the audience so we can encourage them to do it. And Megha, start with you first. Every one of you kind of mentioned the idea of care in your answer, and I love that you did, by the way. The question that was asked is the sort of a traditional question of, it's harder being a woman leading because there's this phrase that you often hear, which is, you're almost there, you're just not quite tough enough, right? So how do you navigate this notion of the great leaders today care, and that sort of notion of you've got to show that you're tough? What's your reaction to that?
I am now sending everyone who didn't watch the inauguration of Joe Biden to go and see it, because I think this is the moment when actually leadership was redefined forever. And what we could see is everyone with their head down, not like, traditional leader, we go and fight, but everyone keeping their head down, saying we are in front of something that is bigger and stronger, and we're humble to admit that, and we need each other and we need help. And I think, this is something that changed the expectations from leaders universally, globally, and it's the outcome of the pandemic. I think it's a very healthy change, and it's the right change towards the right direction. I mean, don't ask me how many in my life I was told you're too emotional. And, nothing irritates me like this phrase, because the truth is everyone is emotional. No matter if you're a woman or a man, you have those emotions. The only thing that actually creates the difference is how good we are in expressing them, whether we are hiding and controlling them or expressing them. The better we express them, the more efficient conversation, and the sooner we actually get to the outcome. So I encourage, by this moment of my life, I am experienced enough whenever I hear that kind of phrase to answer, probably you're not emotional enough. That's where we probably need to meet. So I really think that this is a huge change, and empathy is part of the change. Like, we understand our emotions, but we also observe and understand the emotions of others. And this is what creates the foundation of the new leadership.
At some level, you just gave the operationalization of care and dare, I think, right? Which is because you care, you have to dare, right? And actually, strength comes from caring rather than toughness, which is a paradox, by the way, right? So since you described the phrase, Claudia, can you react to this notion of, but you're just not tough enough, and how that relates to today's world? Because I love Magda's answer. Is there anything you'd add to it?
I don't think it's a characteristic you want to have today. I think the characteristic of the chapter today is to listen, to be curious, to want to learn, much more than toughen. But I've never actually anybody said it to me. I wonder why, but no, joke. But for example, in the press, when there's a woman, there's like, oh, because she's tough. And I think that's a very unconscious bias. I think it's the contrary. You don't want 50-year-old white men in a room sort of seeing who's the toughest. You want a completely different organization. You want a listening organization, a caring organization, and much worried about the common future than yourself.
That felt like it. I mean, what's interesting to me is it feels to me as if we've been building. This is one of the things that I think COVID has done many things, but it's been a gift in some ways, right? Because we've been building to things, and it feels like some things just happened. They've been building for a long time. So, Mag, I think if you take your answer, we've been at that game for a long time about sort of actually empathy is the thing that causes a great leader, but it just never emerged. It's almost like what happened to technology. Now, and I think the symbolism you described about a particular leader is an important one, but there was a moment in time where it feels that it's essential now, that the whole story's changed. So I guess, Barbara, if you don't mind picking up on that, in some ways, we are really in a new era, right, as it relates to leadership. So can you speak to how it happened so fast and what you think the characteristics are, if they're anything more than care and dare?
Just say one thing on the reference you've done to women, no? Because there is always this double standard, no, in leadership type of women. And for the women listening to us, no, as a woman, you always need to flex your leadership style, because either if you're assertive, you're strong, then you are labeled as bossy, no, and aggressive. Or if you're emotional, then you're too soft. So, I mean, for us, it's never okay. You're either too soft or too strong. But it's a bias, of course. But going back to your question, yes, I do think that we have many examples of leadership emerging today. Because also, if you look at the example done before, but example of Angela Merkel, Jacinta Ardern, the leaders in Taiwan, in Finland, in Denmark. I think that the model that comes out is kind and strong. Both things go together. Kindness or caring and strong. And we have the example that it works. interesting enough is people who have been elected. So maybe the concept of this type of leadership is more advanced in the community, in the society, and is more recognized, and maybe is still less recognized inside the corporations, where still maybe we have some road to go, even if, of course, many leaders today talk openly about empathy and caringness and being able to care and take care of others as being a very important value for leadership. In Microsoft, for Satya Nadella, it was paramount for Satya. Satya would speak to Bloomberg about how it's important to be empathic. So
the interesting piece in your answer is that you said kind and strong. I think it's almost strong because you're kind.
Yes.
I mean, because what happens is if you really, and it's sort of, if I listen to all three of you, if you really listen to the various voices you have to listen to, and if you really recognize how important the issues are, you have to act, right? And it's because you act because you care, right? Not because you're trying to prove something, but because, and so it's the reason you took JLL, if I could use the example, right? You said, look, we've got to fix the real estate problem. Why not me, right? We just have to do it, and we need it done, right? And so each of you gave an example of, well, I have no choice but to step up, right? But it emanates from care, which I think is a very different theory of the case, right? So Magda, you're nodding your head, any reflections on that?
Yeah, I think, thank you. I really wanted to add to what Barbara said, because I think one thing that women should not be doing is choosing the style. I mean, the leadership style is that, it's an artificial phrase from the past, probably from some MBAs, where someone were telling you should have a style as a leader. Either you're yourself, you're authentic through self, and you feel that you care about people and you feel the responsibility for acting, or you don't. You cannot really pretend that you care, because everyone will realize that you don't care. Just pretend. So I think there will be a lot of shifts in the leadership boards in the next months and years, because we could see the leaders who were pretending to care, and it's obvious for everyone that they were pretending. I mean, it has to be authentic. It has to be based on your true emotions, on your true engagement, or unfortunately, you will not be the leader of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just to close this piece, and then I want to go to the second to last question with you. But I do think the notion you're articulating, which is, could we just get rid of this whole notion of style, and even get rid of the whole concept of leadership as a position, and actually leadership is the imperative to act. And then actually, because you gave all of you gave examples of people just stepped in and did what needed to be done because it needed to be done. All right. So thank you for that. One other change that's clear is we now live in a world which is massively technology enabled, and actually increasingly, even in manufacturing soon, platforms will be the way life is done. How does that change the way we need to lead? And I guess, Claudia, let's start with you, because you have within your portfolio businesses that are being affected by that and businesses that are driving that. So how do you think we have to think differently about leading in a world which is massively technology enabled?
I think we have to use technology as something for the good. I think that today we can do things like what we're doing here today because of technology. And sometimes we've seen technology as a boundary, and it's not. It's probably our human head is a boundary. At the same time, if robots or computers do what technology has to do, and humans do what humans do best, I think we're in a much better situation in the world. And we have a lack of talent in the world. So if we can get computers to do more boring, number crunching jobs, and humans to do more caring, value-added leadership jobs, I think it's very good. The transition is going to be probably a little bit painful, but I see the end picture as a positive picture.
So, Barbara, you actually put a phrase together that people were probably surprised about, which is a technology-based real estate business, right? So, how do you think about leading a technology-enabled real estate business?
First thing is the technology is, especially with cloud, no, it's available to everybody. The cloud is democratizing technology, so it's accessible to everybody. So the point is how you use that technology. And here there are, I think, two problems. First is upgrade of competencies and skills. So you really need to have the digital talents, the pure tech talents, but you also need to make a huge upgrade for the other people. So everybody needs to understand, not to be an expert of Python or R, but they need to know what technology can do to augment what they are doing today. And second is making sure that we have an holistic view of what technology can do, because normally you start, especially industry which are not at the forefront, you start from innovating on the customer experience, on the employee experience, on the operation, but the more difficult part is to change your business model or to change your products and services. But that's where you need to get eventually, because that is what we mean when we say that you are becoming a tech company. You need to use the data. If you don't have a vision that encompasses also that part, maybe you should start developing it.
So let's do the speed dating round because we're near the end. And so, Meg, I'm going to ask you to do two questions at the same time. So your view on what it means to lead in a technology-enabled world, and then any kind of benedictory thought for the audience, because they're getting to see three pretty amazing human beings. And so if there's any last thought you have for them. So let's start with you and then work our way back to Claudia. Go ahead.
I believe it's a very strong belief for me for many years now that these are the two factors that are changing the world for better, that actually the technology is becoming more and more available. And this process of democratization, which Barbara described, makes it available and accessible to anyone who has the courage to change the way technologies are being used. And the second factor that we're meeting here, there's more and more diversity focus and bringing women to the table and making them decide how this technology will be used, creating a very positive perspective for the upcoming changes. Because I believe the women, with all the care we discussed, will think how the technology can be used to improve the life of others more often than, how to earn on this potential change. So I am very optimistic about what's coming.
And design that consideration into it in the first place, right? Exactly. Yeah. So Barbara, your thoughts? Any benedictory? There's a set of pretty ambitious people listening on this call. Any final reflection for them?
Yes, I have. Having been a consultant myself and now leading a people company, because we do advisory, we do consulting. My advice is don't wait to be perfect. People in consulting tend to do everything super high quality, super perfect. Don't wait to be perfect, because waiting to be perfect is a waste of time. So this is especially true for women, who tend to be ready at 110% before doing something, while a new role, a new professional challenge, you really need to be over-prepared sometimes. So the advice is when you're 80% ready, that's the moment you need to get out of your comfort zone and take the new brilliant challenge.
Claudia, last thought.
That's a very good point. Women normally only ask for a promotion when they're 100% sure, and men are a bit more bullish. So I totally agree with that. I would say that you have to be passionate. I mean, the world is so confusing, so uncertain. It's such hard work that you have to be passionate about what you're doing. And if you're not, just change to another area, because there's, there's a transparency. People smell it. So you really have to love your company and love what you're doing and find in it a purpose. And the second thing is leadership can be at every level. We're talking not only of CEOs. You know, a new trainee that goes into any company, he should be a leader in terms of how he thinks, what he does. And this, I'm very optimistic about this new generation. And when we're talking about caring, I mean, if you have to rally a whole load of new people, young people, more than new people, to do what you would like the company to do, you really have to be very transparent with them, and they really have to be very motivated by your purpose.
So let's close on that. We have to, because we're on the hour. And so just thank you very much for the time. I wish my granddaughters were listening, because you were inspiring and unbelievable. So thanks a lot. So Paola, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blair, and thank you all the guests for these inspiring and amazing messages. I just take the chance to thank all the attendees to this call, to thank Lia Turi and Cristina Amador from the EMEA IND leadership for the superb organization and coordination of all week events. And that's it. I would like just to close with a thought that, of course, IND or D&I is not a question of one day in our life or 1 week, but it's a question of 360 days per year. And it starts, of course, from all of us, men and women. And so we have to go ahead and try to do our best to reach this this equality. So thank you again, and be safe and have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.